There's a place in the Nevada desert where maps go quiet. No street signs, no public roads, no explanations. Just miles of empty land and one invisible line. Cross it, and you won't get a warning. You won't get arrested. You'll just disappear from public knowledge entirely, because whatever exists beyond that line was never meant to be seen. This is the real story behind Area 51. For decades, people have treated Area 51 like a joke. Aliens, flying saucers, conspiracy theories whispered on late-night radio. But here's the unsettling part. The US government spent years pretending it didn't exist. Not classified, not secret, officially non-existent. And when something is hidden that aggressively, it usually means one thing. There's a reason. Area 51 sits deep inside the Nevada Test and Training Range, one of the most restricted airspaces on Earth. Even commercial pilots aren't allowed to fly over it. Satellites avoid it. And if you get too close on the ground, you'll notice something strange. You won't see guards. You won't see fences at first, but you will feel watched. Because long before you ever reach the boundary, they already know you're there. Cameras track you from miles away, motion sensors buried in the dirt, unmarked trucks parked on distant ridgelines. And if you keep walking, that's when the white SUVs appear. No markings, no insignias, just men with binoculars watching you from a distance. They don't approach, they don't speak, they just wait. Because they don't need to stop you. You'll stop yourself, or something worse will happen. But to understand why Area 51 is so protected, you have to go back to the Cold War. Because Area 51 wasn't built for aliens. It was built for something arguably more dangerous: secrecy. In the 1950s, the United States had a problem: the Soviet Union. At the time, the US had almost no reliable intelligence on what the Soviets were doing behind their borders. No satellites, no drones, no way to see inside. And that uncertainty was terrifying, because if the Soviets were building weapons, no one knew how advanced they were. So the US needed eyes in the sky. But there was one problem. Any aircraft flying high enough to spy on the Soviets would be shot down, unless it could fly higher than anything else on Earth. That's when the CIA and Lockheed Skunk Works began developing something impossible: a plane that could fly above 70,000 feet, higher than any military aircraft at the time, so high that enemy radar would barely detect it. They called it the U-2. But building it wasn't the hardest part. Testing it was. They needed a place so remote, so hidden, that no one would ever accidentally see what they were doing. And that's when they found it. A dry lake bed in the Nevada desert. Flat, isolated, invisible. Groom Lake. What would later become known as Area 51. Construction began in complete secrecy. Workers were flown in on unmarked planes. No one used real names. No one talked about what they were building. And if they did, they disappeared from the program overnight. The first test flights were strange. Locals in nearby towns started reporting something unusual in the sky. Objects flying higher than anything they'd ever seen, moving in ways that didn't make sense, at altitudes where normal aircraft simply couldn't exist. And the government's response? Silence. Or worse, denial. Instead of admitting they were testing a top-secret spy plane, the US government allowed people to believe something else, something far more ridiculous: aliens. And that's where things start to get uncomfortable, because the alien narrative wasn't something the government fought. It was something they quietly encouraged. Think about that for a second. If people believe it's aliens, they stop asking real questions. They stop looking for real answers. They stop getting close to the truth. And suddenly, the most absurd explanation becomes the perfect cover story. As technology advanced, so did the projects inside Area 51. The U-2 led to the SR-31 Blackbird, a plane so fast and so high-flying that even today, decades later, it still feels futuristic. Pilots described seeing the curvature of the Earth, flying at speeds where missiles couldn't catch them, and every time one of these aircraft was tested, people on the ground saw something they couldn't explain. Lights in the sky, unnatural speeds, impossible maneuvers, and the legend of Area 51 grew. But here's where the story shifts, because eventually, the secrecy became too big to ignore. In 1989, a man named Bob Lazar came forward with a claim that would change everything. He said he worked at a facility near Area 51 called S4, and according to him, what he saw there wasn't human. Lazar claimed that inside this hidden base, the government was studying alien spacecraft, not building them, not designing them, studying them. Reverse engineering technology that didn't belong on Earth. He described propulsion systems that bent gravity itself, materials that couldn't be replicated, and crafts that didn't use fuel because they didn't need to. Most people dismissed him immediately. Another conspiracy theorist, another story. But there was a problem. Some of the details he gave checked out. He described security systems that were later confirmed. He mentioned hand scanners used for identification that no one outside classified programs should have known about. And he accurately described the layout of facilities that technically didn't exist. So either he was lying incredibly well, or he had seen something real. The government's reaction didn't help. Instead of addressing his claims directly, they tried to erase him. His employment records disappeared, his academic history became unclear, and officially, he never worked there. It was as if his past had been rewritten, which only made people ask a very uncomfortable question. Why go through all that effort if he was just making it up? Around the same time, something else was happening. Workers from Area 51 started coming forward, not about aliens, about something much more grounded and equally disturbing. They claimed that inside the base, they were exposed to unknown chemicals, toxic substances burned in open pits, no protective equipment, no warnings. And years later, many of them got sick, cancer, respiratory diseases, terminal conditions. When they tried to sue the government, they were shut down because officially, Area 51 didn't exist. So how could anything have happened there? Let that sink in. A place so secret that even its victims couldn't prove it was real. By the 2000s, satellite imagery made it impossible to fully hide Area 51. Runways stretching across the desert, massive hangars, unexplained structures, and finally, in 2013, the CIA admitted it. Area 51 was real. But they framed it carefully. They said it was just a testing site, a place for experimental aircraft, nothing more. But by then, it was too late, because the questions had already grown bigger than the answers. Why is the airspace still so restricted? Why are there still no official explanations for what's happening there now? Why do employees commute on unmarked flights every single day from a private terminal in Las Vegas to a base that technically isn't supposed to matter anymore? And maybe the most unsettling question of all, if Area 51 was only ever about aircraft, why did the government spend decades pretending it didn't exist at all? Because here's the reality. Area 51 isn't one story, it's layers. The part we know and the part we don't. Yes, it was used to develop advanced aircraft, that's confirmed, but places like that don't just stop, they evolve, they continue, and whatever's being worked on now is likely just as far ahead of us as the U-2 was in the 1950s. Think about how technology works. The things tested in secret today become public decades later. Stealth technology, drones, hypersonic flight. At one point, all of it sounded impossible. So what's being tested right now? What's flying over that desert that no one is allowed to see? Some former employees have hinted at it. Not aliens, not exactly, but something close. Technology that blurs the line between physics and science fiction. Energy systems that don't behave the way they should. Craft that don't rely on traditional propulsion. Things that, if revealed too early, would change the world overnight. And maybe that's the real reason for the secrecy. Not because of what it is, but because of what it would mean. Because if technology exists that can redefine travel, energy, or warfare, then whoever controls it controls everything. And suddenly, Area 51 stops being about aliens and becomes something far more unsettling. A place where the future is being built in complete silence. So the next time you hear someone joke about Area 51 or dismiss it as just another conspiracy, remember this. The government lied about its existence for decades, encouraged misinformation, and still refuses to fully explain what happens there. Not because there's nothing to hide, but because there is. And somewhere in that desert, beyond the cameras, the sensors, and the unmarked guards, something is still being tested. Something you're not supposed to understand. Something that if you ever got too close, you wouldn't be warned, you wouldn't be questioned. You would simply be erased from the story. Because the truth about Area 51 isn't that it's mysterious, it's that it's quiet. And the quietest places usually hide the loudest secrets.